science talk about the progression, the evolutionary links that connected the different species of ape to our present day modern man. But you know what they've discovered, and what science has actually revealed, is that many of these supposed ancient forefathers of ours on the evolutionary tree were actually hoaxes. That's what science is discovering. I'll give you a couple of examples here. They've discovered that Heidelberg man was built from the jawbone that was considered by many to be human. And it wasn't. It was built from just a simple jawbone. Nebraska man was scientifically built up from one tooth. It was later found to be the tooth of an extinct pig. Piltdown man. The jawbone turned out to belong to an ape after the hoax was discovered. Peking man. All evidence of Peking man's existence has disappeared. Cro-Magnon man. One of the best established fossils, equal in physique and brain capacity of modern man, so there is really no difference between it and modern man. And then there's modern man itself, and many people believe that we actually came from apes. Yeah, it just doesn't, the evidence does line up, and we see over and over again that evolutionary thought and evolutionary theory is in huge trouble. When the book Origin of Species came onto the scene over 100 years ago, it was a revelation. And of course, Darwin and others preached that the links that are missing now would be found. But it's 150 years, nearly 150 years, or 150 years, but still the links are missing. And thousands and thousands of additional fossils have been found, using the latest scientific techniques, using the best trained men and women that this world has to offer, and still the links are not there. The links are missing. And in fact, Charles Darwin himself actually acknowledged some of the many weaknesses in his theory, but they are overlooked, they are covered up by evolutionary scientists today. Notice what Charles Darwin says. This is in a book called My Life and Letters. He says, "Not one change of species into another is on record. We cannot prove that a single species has been changed." And even though people look at the Origin of the Species, which came out in 1859, and they say, you know, this was the standard, this began the movement, this is where scientific thought overthrew the irrational, subjective feelings of Christians or ideas of Christians. But in that very same book, actually in the 4th chapter, this is what he says. In Origin of the Species, he says this: "To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree." That's in the chapter identified as difficulties. These are just the facts. These are just the facts that we have before us. A man by the name of Wolfgang Smith says this. He says, "A growing number of respectable scientists are defecting from the evolutionist camp. Moreover, for the most part, these experts," and he's put them, the inserted commas there, he says, "have abandoned Darwinism." Look at this though. Not on the basis of religious faith or biblical persuasions, but on scientific grounds, and in some instances, regretfully. Now, what does Wolfgang Smith, who is a PhD physicist and mathematician, say? That these people are leaving evolutionary thought. Why is that? It's because of scientific grounds, but many of them are abandoning the theory regretfully, he says there. Regretfully. Just one final thought. If life comes from non-life, then why isn't it possible for you to plant a chair in the garden and water it so that it buds and grows? If, as evolutionary scientists teach you, that life comes from non-life in the beginning, why can't we replicate that in some way today? Well, the reality is that even school children know today, that even little children know, that life cannot come from life. Life has to come from life. If there is design, if there is order, there must have been a designer. And for people to think and to preach and to so boldly present in our textbooks, in our children's textbooks today, that this universe of ours suddenly happened by chance. There was an incredible explosion, and all of a sudden we have these planets circulating the sun. Some of them go in the opposite direction to the others, which actually disproves evolutionary thought there as well, because the explosion would have sent them off in the one direction. But think about planet Earth itself. Think about our planet. You know, we have just the right mix of gases in order for us to survive. We have a veneer around planet Earth called our atmosphere. And it would be a bit like painting veneer around a bowling ball. That would probably be actually a poor representation of the thickness of our atmosphere in relation to planet Earth itself. But everything is balanced so beautifully. And when we look at Psalm 8 verse 3, it says, "When I consider thy heavens and the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him?" You know, the psalmist says when he looks at the creation, he is amazed. And he could see the hand